Go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as presented by staff tonight.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The agenda passes. Moving on to presentations, proclamations, and visitors. This is time we open up for public comment. We have one visitor in the audience that signed up to speak. Is there any online? No. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses.
Garrett Law.
Garrett, please come up to the podium.
And Garrett, if you could just repeat your name, your address, and that would be good.
My name's Garrett Law. I live at 9802 Fox Street in Aumsville. And there's a few things that I'd like to bring up and discuss. One is the 100% of medical for employees. And it was brought up about domestic partnership last meeting. I think that a domestic partnership should be allowed to, sorry, public speaking, I get nervous. Have the same benefits as all other employees within the city of Aumsville. The other thing was, we have a water issue going on right now. I believe that the water issue was based on not doing a study of how many new homes were constructed in the area and how we're going to deal with that wastewater. You got probably 120 homes that were built times 4 people all using the restroom. You also have fertilizer dealing with that. So I think we should have done some due diligence before we built that. And not having the wastewater treatment facility to be able to keep up with demand, causing current residents to deal with bad water, now putting all residents at exposure. Shouldn't we have had plans in place before construction began of the new homes causing contamination of the water? Who is responsible for the technology and improvements? For years, I was required to have my backflow preventer tested and due every year, while my neighbors were never sent a notice or required to have them tested. A backflow preventer is required to be there to prevent a Venturi effect or a vacuum causing the neighbor to drink fertilizer or whatever else the water contains. And the last thing that I wanted to bring up is the recent police officer that we hired. While he's still under investigation for ethics violations within the city of Salem. How and why was this allowed?
So we can, I'm just going to go down the list.
Okay.
The benefits, I believe we voted to pass that for domestic partners. So they will be getting the same. Is that correct? So they will be getting the same as marital partners do.
Okay.
The water issue stems back years. It wasn't anything that the city did or didn't do. It actually came from federal changes that happened with the ammonia level guidelines, because we do discharge into a creek. The system that we have now does not treat ammonia level at all. So to get where we need to be for those federal standards, we have to build a mechanical facility. It's actually mandated up at a higher level.
And that was implemented in 2017?
When was it? Yeah.
That's when we were notified of the changes and that we didn't meet them.
And those were
And so then we had a facility and we still constructed more homes, knowing that our ammonia levels are not correct.
They don't have anything to do with each other.
Ammonia comes from fertilizer and from fecal matter.
Yes, but the amounts that are in there, whether we had added those new homes or not, would not have affected whether we had to get this new treatment plant or not.
Okay.
And for the last topic, the police officer. So the council doesn't have any jurisdiction or authority over who the city hires. That is strictly done within the city. We are here for policies and procedures and to make sure that we are implementing codes and updates.
Okay.
We don't write laws. We make ordinances to help sustain the city. So it's a different, it wouldn't be addressed here. And we couldn't comment on it either because it's actually, there's like labor protection laws that protect them.
Okay. And then the last thing that I did want to bring up was how do we talk about what standards are accepted and not accepted for as far as building stuff at your house? Because I've had a lot of wish-wash issues with that. Ron made me pull a permit with Marion County building codes. I went to Marion County, they said I didn't need a permit. The city of Aumsville had to refund my permit. And now they've changed that. Ron's saying that I can't build anything over 6 foot tall fence. So legally in the state of Oregon, I can build an 8 foot privacy fence if I have it engineered and stamped by a professional engineer.
So I don't know all the, thank you.
Just a little background. So this dates back to 2019. And remember, our codes were different in 2019. We had a couple of conflicts in the code. That was one of the reasons why we were trying to update it, because the code would say one thing in one section and another thing in another section. Back in 2019, you could build up to a 7 foot fence, but over a 6 foot fence, you had to get Marion County approval. Under today's standards.
That's not true.
This
You can build a 7 foot fence in Marion County, non-permitted.
Okay.
Anything over 7 feet fence, 7 foot tall, you have to have a permit.
So our standard was 6 feet at the time, but in our code, we had a section that contradicted it and said 7 feet. So we were trying to reconcile that with the project, but the big impasse we had was over where the ground started and where the fence started. And so those were things that we were trying to work through. But then recently we spoke to them again about another project and the fence came back. And so we're just trying to work through those issues.
I'm trying to work with it being fair. If you're a construction company, you can do anything in the city of Aumsville. If you're a private homeowner, you cannot.
Is that one of the ordinances that's up for review?
We have an ordinance update that's not part of the.
Not part of, okay.
So the reason why Ron made me go and pull a permit is because I wanted to build a retaining wall and then put a 7 foot fence on top of it. Just like they did on the brand new homes that they built down the road, where they put the retaining wall right to the edge of the curb and they built a 6 foot fence. It's over 9 feet tall. And that's why you made me pull a permit, because you said I was trying to build a 9 foot fence when I'm not trying to build a 7 foot fence on an 18-inch retaining wall. And then to also address the concrete issue in the front yard, he says I cannot have concrete. I dug out my driveway there to put concrete in. He says I can't do it.
That ordinance, I do remember. We did
So how did
update that.
the homeowner of the multi-million-dollar home with a shop have all concrete in his front yard? It's on Willamette Street, right by a little ways past the church or the.
Again, that was predated the code update and the vision plan. As council remembers, back in 2017, we entered into the visioning process. We had a bunch of community meetings. We had an ad hoc committee that studied it, made up of businesses, residents, and elected officials. And we were doing two things. One was to adopt the vision and then have, as we did the code updates, where we're trying to get the code without conflicts. We were also memorializing those things in the vision of the code, and most of the time in the code had already had that language in there. We were just tightening it up so that folks couldn't try to reinterpret it in different directions. There's.
Isn't it-
So that was my question
Isn't it
was,
the American way, Ron,
No.
to be able to pride yourself in your design and your thought process of how you want to improve your home, as long as it's within certain guidelines? It's not like I'm trying to make my house.
so
Yeah.
that, you answered my question, Ron. Was that before or after we updated? I do remember we also, we did have a meeting and we updated that code because we have a green cap that we have to make sure that we're adhering to. And one of those things was the no concrete in the front yards. We have to have a certain percentage of lawn. So if that house was prior to that update, then that's how they were able to get it in.
Okay,
Well, and the difficult part is if it's this house that I think you're speaking of, I believe that when that subdivision went in originally years back, it was a part of a custom home that obviously we didn't regulate at that time. What was allowed versus what wasn't allowed, or if it was very open, the language in the actual regulations. And it's one of those things that unfortunately, with changes in administration, changes in council, we've had to kind of make, those changes as we've gone along, especially for things that maybe worked in 1975 that obviously don't work anymore. Not that I'm justifying the situation, but I'm just kind of giving you some context. We last couple of years we've had to spend, thousands of dollars kind of clean up our language. I know at one point banned, I think, that we regulated the number of dogs and cats you could have, but we actually allowed pigs at one point in the city, all because at one point not this body currently, but the council back in, I believe, the 80s, early 90s okayed that for one residence. So it's kind of been difficult as we had to kind of go through all of our code to try to change it up and try to make it more
doesn't put more of a
uniform.
burden on the city to have their own special permits and requirements for the city versus just, these are the set standards, guidelines by Marion County, and follow those guidelines and not have a restriction on what your height is? I mean, from my personal standpoint, I have no privacy. That's why I want to build the fence. And it took 6 months back in 2019 of getting the runaround. And then Marion County kind of put Ron in his place about, no, he doesn't need a permit. That's the standard, Ron. And I have the emails, and Ron sent me an email saying I could build it that way. Now they've changed. My wife recently broke her ankle. She's had 2-foot surgery, so I didn't get a chance to. And now he's saying that I can't build it that way. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up too was, now that I did dig up my front lawn, I found a sewer pipe in my front yard, right under a bush. It's not capped, it's all broken. It's past the 30-foot right of way where it's supposed to be from center of roadway. So they're outside of the right of way in the public utility easement, which is not on my deed of my property. Asking my neighbors, it's not posted on their deed of property either.
Those were posted on your plats when they're recorded.
Yes.
For
but
the sewer.
Wouldn't it be better to just have a PUE statement in the deed when you guys issued Heiberg?
The state requires it to be on the plat of the subdivision. If your deed doesn't include it, it's because whoever prepared it didn't put it in there.
Okay,
I can tell you that because I work in the title industry and there are numerous times I see deeds that say easements of record. They don't list them. But it
Okay.
is on all plats. It's been required since the 60s by the state.
and those are the topics that I wanted to bring up and discuss, and I'd like to, review the language of planning. I mean, do we even have a planner, like an actual
planning.
surveyor?
We have
Did
a
they-
planning commission and yeah.
Did they go to school for surveying?
No,
Yes, they're certified planners.
we hire
is-
certified planners when we have projects that we need to have reviewed. We don't
Then
have one
why
on
don't we just
staff.
Use PCD instead of using City of Aumsville's money to hire a planner.
Use whose?
Building Codes Division?
No,
That
they
have-
pay for their own. Marion County is not responsible for our bills, unfortunately. We
No,
cannot go
I'm
by-
saying why can't we use BCD as a service and not use City of Aumsville money to pay a private planner to review plans? We could
It's-
use BCD, Marion County, to
No, you
review the
can't.
plans.
They already review our plans.
So when I pull a
We-
electrical permit
Yes,
to build a house and install the service, does it go to City of Aumsville or does it go to Marion County?
electrical and plumbing usually go straight to Marion County. The rest
And
of
so
them
does
have to come through Aumsville and then to Marion County and then back.
Does structural go to BCD?
Yes,
So
After it comes
all
here.
three services, they also do site plans and review, right?
yes,
For construction of a new home,
but that has nothing to do with what a planner does
how does that have nothing to do with what a planner does?
because the planner is the one that helps you decide what the city requires and doesn't require and that what we do meets the requirements that we have put into effect. And that
Based
we
on-
meet the state of Oregon laws in planning for any type of rules and regulations that are required for land development.
Based on structural, electrical, plumbing, and site survey, right?
No, there's more than that for a planner.
Okay. I was just trying to bring up ideas to save money for the city. I mean. You could.
Well,
have
we
the-
already pay Marion County to review our permits and part of the fees that you pay to the city when you get a permit.
Okay,
One, I think, because of our land use system, and I could be wrong, but I believe because of even if we were like not a city, if we were just a planned community or just, like what I think they have in Clackamas County where they have like the villages or whatever, we'd still have to, in order for us to formulate, whatever our urban growth is going to be, whatever direction we're gonna be developing, we're required by the state to have that. And, we could literally make the codes to where we wouldn't have any development at all. We'd still be required to pony up for having a planner to assist us with that. Cause I think those things are required by the state, aren't they, Ron? I mean, I could be wrong, but
Oh, they are.
and I mean, we could have, a net of 5 people move into the city, over a period of like 10 years and still be required to have to pay those services, unfortunately. I mean, personally, it's hard because I get a lot of frustration and want to pull my hair out over some of the things the state kind of puts on us, but at the same time, it's difficult trying to balance, aesthetics, balancing, what, you're able to allow people to do. And it's, I mean, there've been a few times where I've been the lone person, because I personally think if you want to put a planter box in your front yard, you should be able to, but I've been one of those people that have been on losing end of that in the past because just, we've had enough, people both in the audience as well as serving up here that have kind of said, well, you need to be able to decide where you put your planter boxes and just, the stuff that we do. I mean, we have an agenda and it's not sexy stuff. It's not fun stuff, but it's one of those things that just I kind of tell people you have to kind of just at least on a monthly basis, just look at and review because there might be something you may want to talk about and discuss and be a part of the policy making decisions. And then it's crummy because other than us having, I mean, we do our best with having it online, obviously on YouTube and trying to, have, communications on social media as well as, posting our agenda. But, it's one of those things that just you have to kind of watch for. And, if we're discussing something, especially in regards to, building code or standards, or if we're revisiting some of the code that we have, it's one of those things that just, it would be like crickets having people in here. And it's until after the fact that we make those policy decisions that we'll have people that'll say, oh, I wish I would have known about that. And it's one of those things that just, you have to kind of just watch for, unfortunately. It's kind of sucky how
So
that
when
system is, but.
the planning commission and how do we go about that and trying to put into change policies and procedures? How do we approach that?
I believe the planning commission meets once a month, I think,
It's as needed.
as needed, I think when,
Bishop doesn't, set the policies and procedures, they council set the policies and procedures, and the planning commission.
So who enforces the policies and procedures? So why are you discriminating against me and not any of the other homeowners that? Or the new homes that were constructed?
I think what I said to you earlier today is you have an example of something that you think is out of compliance and you bring it to me, I will look at it under that lens. But some of the things that you're bringing up are things that happened development code updates, and some of those things were, the reason why we did some of the updates was because of those examples that you're citing. And so they're under land use law, under Oregon law, those are permitted. Once they're permitted, the code changes, they're allowed. And I think I gave you some examples of that earlier today when we spoke about how people manipulated the code and tried to press the envelope on things that they wanted to do versus what the intent of the code was. And that was one of the reasons why we looked at all of those discrepancies.
Is it up to you to determine what the intent of the code is, or is it up to the landowner?
Pardon me?
Is it up to you to determine what the intent of the code is, or is it up to the landowner?
Well, it's up to council that each chapter, there's an intent section that says what the intent is.
Okay.
Usually when people have questions about the code, like we always tell them to go through the city first, right? Go through the proper channels, contact Ron, contact the city. If you have questions or you have an idea about changing codes, or you think something is out of date, you can submit a request online. You can also email us online and say, this is the code, this is the issue I have. And also, if you give the idea of how you want to update it and how you feel it's beneficial, that helps us when we meet together and we talk.
Okay.
And we've actually made a number of changes to the code based on that exact feedback. But what we do is we test it against the vision and make sure it's not counteractive to the vision. And then we see, does that fit with the intent of the code? And if it does, we recommend council look at that in a positive light, and they made changes this last year. They made changes.
When we did the vision planning, that was in 2018?
What?
2020. Okay. So that's when we had like this room packed. We had several meetings. People were standing against the walls, and the whole community gave their opinion on what we wanted between a 5-year, a 10-year, and a 20-year. And the codes, how we interpret and update, is based on that vision plan that we had set out, and we worked with the community. Again, a 5-year, a 10-year, a 20. So when we make changes to the code, we're going off of what the community told us they wanted.
Okay.
It's also challenging too, because we're hamstrung by land use board of appeals and court decisions too, because there have been a few times where we've thought, oh, well, we want our front yards or backyards or accessory structures to be a certain way. And then, we'll find out, not only just from our planner, but also from the news media that, city even bigger than us lost like a $50 million case, over that. And essentially new policy is made because of it going all the way up to land use board of appeals, and then them saying, no, that's not what you should be doing with, accessory structures, as well as, how you're, laying out, urban growth boundaries and things like that. So we have a little bit of discretion, but our discretion is very, very minimal, because of, prior case history. And also just, it's changing all the time. I believe only recently in the last 2 years, we've been able to have, just an example, we've been able to have some changes to the sort of play structures we have, because just for a long time, due to previous court cases, we didn't have very many play structures, especially that, you don't hardly see merry-go-rounds or anything like that anymore, because of liability in our hands being just so tight of what we can have and what we can't have. I would definitely, urge you just to, if you have any specific feedback that you think we can do better, let us know, and, email us, or I know that form's on there. And, when we get to the point again of discussing those things, it's something that we definitely, want to take into account and kind of see how we can maybe make some changes to the code
Well,
that we can make, that is, so.
I mean, like, for example, most families now have 3 cars, right? Pretty common, right? So if I have a 2-car garage, why can't I have expanded to park 3 cars there? Why can't I go to the right? What is the big deal about that?
Has
Now,
to do
Ron-
with driveway approaches. There
Okay,
are state laws that state how many feet they have to be away from your neighbor's property and different things like that we have to adhere to. So sometimes you're able to have a driveway where you can drive from your driveway apron over onto it, but you can't necessarily expand your driveway approach.
And it's really different per property. I mean, I can speak to this a little bit for you, Garrett. So the issue isn't what can you or can't you necessarily do. It's he can have an extra parking space to the left because we've said in our code, you can expand that to the left. Now, remember, we require a 2-car garage and we require a driveway. It's 2 cars. So the reality is somebody can park 4 cars, and if they wanted to expand the driveway to the left, they could have to park an additional car. Garrett would like to put his driveway over into his front yard, and that's where it violates that green space landscaping requirement that we have. Remember, years ago, we struggled with this issue through the vision plan. We had a lot of feedback about people that had neighbors that were parking in the front yard. There was a lot of discussion, and that was part of memorializing that into the code. So it's not a matter of can he do it or can he do it. He can do a lot of what he wants to do. He just can't do it exactly how he wants.
that's not what we discussed earlier today, Ron, but okay. That's your interpretation and your opinion, but that's not what was discussed. My wife was there also.
I think I drew it out on the map. Yeah.
Okay,
So, back to like the process of having those ordinances, having us review those ordinances, right? So you can submit it online, you can email us directly, all of us, or just a couple of us, and say, this is what I have. We do take those communications very seriously. And we talk about them. We just did it not that long ago when we talked about the fake grass in the front yard. Someone had come to city council and said, I think this is outdated. And he gave great examples of why we should change it. And we did. So that was not even on our lens of changing. So we do take those requests seriously, and we talk about them, and we discuss it.
okay. And then the last thing is employees for the city of Aumsville being paid 100% for their medical insurance. Why does city do that?
Why do we cover 100% of their medical insurance? We do that. I'm not sure. That was before I got on.
It's
council.
always been that way as long as I known, and it's part of their benefits package, and their salary is reflected in what we provide as benefits as well.
Okay, isn't that an additional added expense to the city?
Well, that's why we said it's part of their benefits package, which their salary may be slightly lower to reflect the benefits that they get
Okay.
compared to other places.
Well, I'm just saying, I work for the state and they took percentage of my paycheck to pay for my medical insurance for me and my family.
I just left the state and I work for an organization that pays 100% of my medical. It just depends on, that was grandfathered in before I became on council, and then I'm on my 5th year, and I think Della's been here the longest. Nico would be before.
Okay.
I'll speak from experience. So, I've been involved with the city since about 2008. I've been on council since 2009, and I've been a part of a team that's kind of negotiated benefits with, the city administrator for the other employees. And I think what the mindset has been is just, it was more towards retaining good employees. And I think I would guess probably every 2 to 3 years, like, the issue comes up again. And what we try to do when we make these decisions is not so much compare ourselves to the state or the county, but we take into consideration other cities that are our size and that are larger, and kind of what benefits they have versus what we have. And I think it was 2011, 2012 when we were kind of going through that challenging, I mean, it's crummy now, but there were a lot of people that were losing jobs then, and we were having a hard time retaining employees. I believe at that time, we decided to keep that in order to keep, the employees we had at that time. And I know the last time we discussed it, I believe it was about 3 years ago, with it being kind of a buyer's market, so to speak, as far as like, people that, I mean, like take myself, for example, I've worked retail for 10 years and now I work for the VA, and a lot of people that work kind of, the bottom lower level jobs. That's one good thing the pandemic did, is kind of kicked them in the ass, for lack of a better term, to say, okay, my worth's better than this. And so from that, every government, in addition to the private sector, was having challenges retaining people. And I know when we talked about it as a group, then we said we wanted to keep that as a benefit in place so we could be able to retain people as well as hire people, especially, I think a lot of people can speak to the fact that the older you get, I mean, yeah, money's nice, but obviously having wonderful healthcare benefits is huge. I think that's why we kept it. And just it's not something I don't think we can.
I'd say great for the employees of the city of Aumsville. I think that's great, but it's
We-
also our second highest cost as per last meeting that I watched. Besides payroll, so.
Well, and I agree, but also in this, we try to look at it holistically. There is a lot of cost involved too. We went through several employees also where, we were replacing positions, and obviously there was a cost to us having to replace those positions. That was part of our mindset with retaining that. And I mean, with inflation being what it is, with healthcare being what it is, it's not something that we probably could, to be quite honest, could probably sustain much anymore. And the next time we discuss our budget, we'll put it out there, and we'll, have some different, feedback from the community regarding that. But, I think for a long time we were able to retain good employees because of that, since we made it a part of our benefit package. And, I mean, I know, just speaking from my experience, my VA insurance, my deductible is $1,200. So it's gone up every year for me personally, and,
Our budget meetings are they're open to the public even before they come to the council. And we spend a lot of hours going over, it's a line item budget. So what is ever costed into that specific item, it's there. We're not going to be able to move it around. And there's very few cases where we can. The next time, when do we start our budgeting again, Ron?
April, May.
January, before the council in April and May.
So like those types of things, I would encourage you to come back when we're actually reviewing, because we can't do anything about it now, right? 'Cause,
Yeah.
it's already said.
I'm curious about.
yeah.
that.
And going on what Nico says, I am really proud of our city staff. And I really hope that we had Colleen stay for years and years, and she just retired. And we want to encourage people to come and work for us because we can provide them those services. And when we start talking about nickel and dime, like it really affects how our employees are feeling about their jobs. So I think we have a good staff, and as long as we can continue to support them as much as possible, I will
Okay.
support their insurance.
Well, I think part of the thing too is there have been some awesome things we've been able to do, I think, from like our public works especially, that we would have to contract out, otherwise, and it would cost even more. So it's, I think, honestly, probably paid for itself, us covering that benefit. But kind of like Angelica said, that'll be something we'll be looking at too. And we would appreciate you to be a part of that too, if you'd like to be.
I'm gonna sit on every board council from here on out, so.
Yeah, I love it when people come. I do. I kind of miss, we used to have people, before we started doing more online stuff, we actually had more people coming to the meetings. So
Well, I think we're heading in a wrong direction, so. That's just my personal opinion, especially around planning. And I mean, who inspects these new construction projects? What,
Marion County,
but you said that Marion County,
we have to contract with them to do it. We do not have enough construction here to pay for our own building inspector or anything. So we have to contract with different counties and state services to provide those
Actually, the state law requires us to contract. Green County, we're not allowed to.
Your own, so then we develop guidelines around something that Marion County doesn't even enforce. It's the city, so we put more burden on the city.
I don't understand the question.
If it's a building permit, electrical, plumbing, or a new construction, it goes to Marion County. If it's some other little project that the city wants some special permit that the property
So
owner has to
that's the
fill out.
Public Works that inspects the small projects, if that's what you're asking about.
Yes,
We simply have you get the type A permits so that we can make sure your project meets the codes. And we don't have people building things like over on 8th Street. We have people that are a foot off of their property with a shed because they didn't pay attention to what the guidelines were. And that's why we have guidelines. Because
okay.
now we have an encroachment on someone else's property.
And really, the reason why we have a type B permit, Garrett, is because what we don't want to do is have to come back and have somebody tear something out that they've constructed. And it's a free permit because we're trying to do that in advance. We're trying to say, here's the guideline that you need to meet based on the code. And if you construct it this way, you're not going to have an issue. So it's really a protection for the resident. Versus if they try to read the guidelines and interpret it and come up with an interpretation that's different than the code, and then we have to go out and have them remove it or alter it, that's expensive, and that's.
In 2019, your interpretation of the code was completely opposite of what Marion County Building Codes Division said was correct. And then it came back and
But Marion County code they don't administer our code, they only administer their building. Their code, not our code. For things other than structural permits. So structural, electrical, plumbing, they follow the international building. But all of the land use type codes or the internal codes, they don't administer those, we do.
Okay.
So as an example, if you got a Marion County permit and you didn't get a permit from the city and it was a structural permit, and the structure was framed in and it didn't meet setbacks, they would sign off on it because they don't inspect our setbacks for the city, only we do. So they would still approve it, even though it might violate the setback laws in the ordinance. So there, it's a two system, but we have our own rules. They don't supersede those.
besides when it comes to electrical, plumbing, or structural permit.
Those
Because nobody can build anything unless they go and pull that permit from BCD. And then you guys have to review it after BCD clears it. Right? That's how the procedure works, correct?
No,
So structural permit is something you're talking about?
Or electrical or plumbing.
We don't review electrical and plumbing. We don't have that expertise. That's all done through Marion County. We don't review your structural plans for international building. When you come in with structural plans, we're looking at is your site plan, your setbacks, your lot coverage, your design standards. Those are the things that we look at.
Okay,
And we send it to Marion County. They do the review for the plan review. Now, plan review is different than land use planning. So those are two different things. Land use planning is the zone,
the zoning requirements, where the PUE is gonna be. Where the right of way is gonna be placed in the road.
Yeah, and the right of way, just because the center of the line, and we can use a few days over, but just because the center of the line is marked somewhere, doesn't mean that's where the center of the right of way is. That's just where the center line mark is. But that may not necessarily be that marker to be able to identify where right of way is. But we'll look at all of that for you if you come in with your permit. We'll look at all of that.
Well, I feel like the legal jargon also in the Class A permit at the very bottom that requires a signature, I don't feel comfortable signing that until I have a lawyer review that. So. I feel like it's up for your interpretation of what the code says and no one else's. And then when you do have to do something with BCD, they tell you otherwise. So how does that work? You determine what happens in the city and supersede BCD, even though they are the standard for the state?
No jurisdiction other than the International Building Code, so that's the only thing that they have jurisdiction.
So wouldn't it be easier for the city of Aumsville just to follow the international building codes and not set all these rules and regulations?
Yeah, it's two separate things.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your guys' time. I don't want to keep eating up everybody's time, but
Thank you for coming. I do encourage you to email us with the exact codes that you're talking about and then your solutions.
Yeah.
the exact codes, like
Yeah.
allow like a reasonable amount. I'll draw something up in AutoCAD and give it to you guys.
That is helpful for us.
Make
for
sure you
reasonable-
read the development ordinance to make sure you're within the confines of it as well. It is
But
online
that's
for you.
what I'm talking about. The development ordinance are progressing back 10 years. So. And that's what Ron gets to interpret, and he decides what is actual.
So we went through and updated
Did-
those and spent $10,000 doing that to bring them up to date
Yeah, that wasn't,
and to meet the current requirements that the citizens wanted.
that's what the process that we started in 2020.
Okay.
They were,
How many citizens reviewed this document and before?
we had hundreds of people come down here over the course of several meetings.
Over several years.
Okay,
I mean, some of them, there was 150 people. We met over at the fire station because there wasn't enough room here.
all right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Hey, Garrett.
So moving on to the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Let me get close to my microphone. I have one tiny little thing that needs fixed. On the second page, Counselor Wick mentioned he spoke to the fleet manager with Marion County about Sheriff's Office Durangos. Because he doesn't work for the Sheriff's Office, he works for Public Works. That's it.
On the consent agenda? Second page.
Spoke to the fleet manager of Public Works is what you're saying.
About the sheriff's.
So then we need a motion with the adjustment.
I move to approve the consent agenda with the correction that it be the fleet manager of Marion County Public Works that Counselor Wick spoke to in regards to the sheriff vehicles.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda is approved with modifications.
I'm abstaining just since I wasn't present, but yeah.
Okay, we have one abstention. Moving on to public hearings. So we have open SCS Communications franchise renewal hearing ordinance 720.
You announce the time, please.
It is 7:43. Don't send that fly my way.
Yeah, I was.
Not trying to send it anyway, but I can't get it.
All right, if you're ready for my my staff report?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So, as council recalls, we updated our, master communication, ordinance, 460 a couple of months ago, and that was, anticipation of working with, several new, franchise agreements that were coming due, and one new franchise agreement application. And we wanted to update the code, the master communication code, because the FCC had changed some of the guidelines related to communications through COVID, and just through some changes since that code was approved. And we wanted to make sure that some of those FCC regulations were memorialized in any new franchise agreements that we were going to approve. This franchise agreement was a 10-year franchise agreement with SCS Communications. And It's due, it's expired. We worked with our franchise attorney and the attorney for SCS Communications to develop some of those changes. This was really a light edit in this particular one because this actually was one of our more well-written franchise agreements. So there were just some minimum changes in this one. And also we pointed this agreement to the master communication franchise agreement as the overall authority. And that's where we made a lot of those FCC changes. A couple of the changes, just to remind council, are things like memorializing the insurance requirements for entities that have a franchise with the city and working in city right-of-ways that follows the state guidelines for tort claims instead of a kind of a set amount. So we put a set amount in there, which is today's standards. But then in that agreement, we put some language in that said, as those amounts change, we'll follow those state guidelines for those standards. We really when we do a franchise agreement, what we're doing is we're setting rules in place for public right-of-ways, wherever those public right-of-ways are, not necessarily private property. But just since we had some discussion today about PUDs and things of those nature, one of the things we did in that master franchise agreement edit was we put some reference in there about restoring private property if if a company that has a franchise has to dig up somebody's private property, and we can't necessarily enter some sort of a civil claim against that entity on private property, but it does give the property owners a little bit more of an argument to go after the franchise and say, hey, you didn't restore this property back to the way it should be. So we did put some language in there to try to give the individual homeowner some more leverage or authority. Otherwise, it's really unchanged. We changed the term. We just made a couple of minor edits to this. And that was really about it. I'm going to see if I. Yeah, really, there wasn't a tremendous amount of red lines with this one. It was pretty good. But you've had a chance to look this over. It's a standard agreement. Basically, it gives them the ability to put their infrastructure within the city right away. If there's separate easements, they have to do those separately. That's a separate transaction, not necessarily through the city, as Councilmember Sini pointed out. And then for that right away use, they pay a percentage of their overall gross sales in the city. Happy to answer any questions or follow up.
I read through this already. I don't have any questions. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Are there any public comments on this? Okay. So we will close the public hearing on this at 7:48 p.m. It says council deliberations. It doesn't sound like we have anything. Then we just need a council decision. So is there a motion?
I move to approve the first reading by title only of ordinance 720, and ordinance granting a franchise for communications purposes to SCS Communications and Security Inc. as presented by staff.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Move on to the second reading.
I move to approve the second reading by title only and adopt ordinance 720, and ordinance granting a franchise for communications purposes to SCS Communications and Security Inc. as presented by staff.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion passes. Moving on to old business. We have no old business. Number 6, new business, contract with Brick and Mortar Realty LLC, and then contract with Sightline for tower lease.
I'll start with the first one. The first one is a property management service contract. This is for the city's rental home. We have one home that we bought possibly for an expansion to city facilities at some point in the future. And rather than just leave it sit, we rent it out and we use a property management company to manage that rental property. The owner of the management company we were using decided to retire suddenly for some personal reasons, and his staff started a new company, and that's the one that has proposed for you today. So they do a pretty good job managing. They get 10% of their rent. They collect all the fees, and it's actually a pretty good relationship, but we don't really have to do a lot with tenants. I did memorialize a couple of changes. This is a standard state contract, rental contract agreement. It follows state law. So there's a lot of things when you're dealing with rentals now, especially with state law. So they take the burden of administering all of that for us. The only thing that I did do was I did memorialize at the end of the contract that we want them to contact us for maintenance issues with the rental house, because oftentimes our public works staff can just go take care of those things right away versus hiring a maintenance person, and that can get costly, and we'd rather save the money, obviously. And then notify the city administrator when there's a vacancy. I think anytime there's a vacancy with the rental property, I want to be able to come back and check with council to see if we have a change in desire of what we're using the property for. So I just asked them to include that. And then contact the administrator about setting the rates, rental rates each year. One of the things we've found is the rental rate kind of has fallen behind maybe market value, and we just want to make sure we're testing that and that it's keeping up with market value. So those were the three things we added. If you're good with that, I just asked for a motion to authorize the administrator to execute the property management contract with Brick and Mortar Realty LLC.
I don't have any questions. Does anyone else?
No.
Get a motion?
I move to approve the city administrator enter into a contract with a Brick and Mortar Realty to serve as our property manager as presented by staff.
Do we got a second? I didn't hear it. Okay,
Second.
all those in favor?
Second.
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Moving on to the contract with a Sightline for tower lease.
And so this was a Sightline tower lease. That's for our water tower here at Tower Park. Basically, they sell a cell service subscription, and their antennas project that cell service throughout the city. And this contract expired this year. Last year, council directed me to enter negotiations with the entity Sightline, which is actually now rolled into Visor. So this agreement's name is a contract with Visor because they sell the service. And we had a number of changes to how we wanted this contract to read. One is we wanted it to be more consistent with the other contracts that we have on the cell tower. This was, I think, one of the first contracts the city entered into for that service. And, you know, the terms were very favorable to the tenant. And so we wanted to make sure that we actually had that a little bit closer in line with some of our policies. And some of those policies are putting an escalator on the rent. So if you're going to have a 10-year contract, it stands to reason over 10 years, it's going to be worth more than it was in year one, right? Just like real estate's worth more. So those were things that weren't in the old contract that we wanted in the new contract. We did put some language in here about condemnation and or if the tower ever became offline. As council knows, that's a lot, some of our discussion about the seismic integrity of that elevated tower, and we don't know what the future holds. 5 years from now, or even 10 years or 20 years from now, we don't know what that timeline is. But we just wanted to make sure we had some language in there that one, provided a mechanism to continue service with the tenant. But the other thing is to make sure that the city had a good legal language. If something happened outside of our control, we weren't responsible for it, so to speak. And, it could, we don't know if we go through a process and somebody inspects the tower and says it's not sound and we got to take it offline. That very well could happen. We don't know, but it could. So just some things in there that kind of meet that intent that we discussed earlier in the year. I'd been working with Sightline. It's been kind of a slow, or Pfizer, it's been kind of a slow process. And recently they basically said, yes, let's move it forward to council. So that's why I'm here tonight. Their current lease has expired. Their current lease language allows a month-to-month tenancy until either a termination or a new contract is approved. So I'm hoping to get this approved tonight so the new terms can take effect.
So regarding to that question, she does have a response.
That was me again. Yeah, they didn't respond, so I lowered the hand.
A text message.
Okay, I can let her in. Let's see. All right, is it Kaylee or Callie?
Kaylee.
All right, Kaylee, you are able to speak now if you want to unmute. If you are talking, I cannot hear you.
Maybe she can type her question.
Yeah, so Kaylee, we can't hear you at all. If you want to type your question, I'll read it out loud.
Maybe she can text her question.
Yeah, have her
Yeah.
text the question to you.
So, as long as we get the question.
Yeah. Oh, is that her? She's on.
Oh, was that you clearing your voice? I think we heard you.
Yeah.
Can you ask your question?
No.
Next meeting.
All right.
All right, we couldn't get a hold of her to get her question, and it looks like we're having some technical difficulties, so we can move on. Where are we at now? Are you done, Ron?
Unless you have questions for me.
I am very familiar with this franchise, so I don't have any questions. Do you guys have any questions? So are we looking for a motion to approve the new? Okay, we just need a motion from somebody.
Move to approve move to authorize City Administrator Harding to enter into a new agreement between the city of Aumsville and Pfizer for purposes of the Tower Park site lease as presented by staff effective today, September 25th, 2023.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, so moving on to the city administrator report. The first thing we have is Aumsville infrastructure and community engagement.
Yeah, so that's a presentation. I'm just gonna touch on something real quick, and then while Kirsty's loading up the presentation. In your packet is also an award letter from USDA, and we were officially awarded a $6 million loan forgiveness grant on a $15 million loan related to our wastewater project. That's pretty good. We do have to take a loan for $9 million. But to get $6 million free, it's pretty kind of unheard of. So I just wanted to point that out. Council, it's an official award. Council's not committing to anything at this point, but I just wanted to let you know that that was public now. It was official. We've worked a couple of years to get this $6 million grant, 3 years behind the scenes. And as council knows, we really had to act fast and juggle things around to meet all the qualifiers from census data to budget deadlines. And we were navigating all of that behind the scenes, but it's $6 million of burden that now the community doesn't have to bear. And that's pretty good. And so one of the things that Kirsty and I and a number of other staff have teamed up to do, we've been really working behind the scenes to acquire either really favorable funding options and or grants for a lot of our infrastructure projects because they're expensive, and we understand the transitions that happened from 2017 to today. Our community is very sensitive to the cost of those things, and so we've been doing everything that we can to try to lower that burden that normally would fall on ratepayers. Now, the ratepayers are going to have to take a certain share of the burden, but we're doing everything we can to reduce that to the smallest number possible. And I know we had told our community several months ago that our utility bills could be as high as $300, and several months ago that was true. But through the success that we've had, it's not true today. That number is greatly reduced. I don't want to give you a number.
That's what I was gonna ask.
I know you would like a number. I don't want to give you a number, but we are doing some work to come up with some projected numbers so that we can update the community where that is. And we also need some tighter projected numbers for some of the loans. So we'll be working with some companies that specialize in developing that data. We could come up with hypotheticals, but they would have a range of plus and minus.
So for the public that reviews this later, I just want to make sure that we clarify this $6 million grant is contingent on us taking that loan. So we have to take that $11 million loan, and then they will forgive 6 million of it. Or sorry,
$9 million.
$9 million loan, and they'll
Yeah.
forgive 6 million of it.
That's right.
Was this the one?
It's a total of 15.
million.
Yes.
6
Yeah.
million
Thank
forgiven,
you.
9 million paid.
And I'll explain all of that in just a second. I just wanted to point that out to you. So as we're meeting with a lot of these different agencies, they have commented that the work that we have done here at the city is kind of remarkable, and a lot of other communities and or public entities could benefit from understanding how we approached it, how we went about it, how we built consensus within the community, inform the community about the projects. And so they've asked us to come and do a number of presentations. One is at an statewide infrastructure summit on Thursday. And that's what we'll be doing this presentation for. It has a very specific time constraint, so this presentation is somewhat scaled down from what we'd like to be able to do to explain our story. So just keep that in mind when we give the presentation. And then the League of Oregon Cities has their annual conference in October, and we've also been tapped to give a presentation to other cities on how to go about accessing some of these dollars and or building consensus and a coalition, not just with your community, but also a policy group and the agencies themselves, because to some extent, you have to accept a partnership. We could go in a lot of different directions in dealing with mandates. And what we've chose to do is the path of least resistance and also the path of least expense to get us there. So that's what we chose to do. So we'll go ahead and start So Kirsty and I are going to kind of tag team this. We wanted to give you like a preview and then get feedback from you on things that we might say. So.
And I haven't done any public speaking in quite a while, so be patient with me.
Be sure to talk into the mic.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
And really, Kirsty has been considered a leading driver, I guess, behind our entire communication plan. And as council knows, a couple of years ago, that was one of the feedback I received from you. And that was about, how do we communicate this stuff out to the community? How do we build a coalition? And how do we change some of the perceptions? Because oftentimes one of the things we hear a lot from community members is, I didn't know about that. Because this stuff's not exciting. You start talking about infrastructure, people's eyelids start to get heavy. But you talk about things like Christmas in the park and everything first. And so that was centered to our plan.
Absolutely. So, Aumsville, as you guys all know, has faced a lot of seemingly impossible infrastructure challenges through the years. As a small community, we see pressure from agency regulations as well as unfunded infrastructure needs and local pressure from residents who either don't want to or can't afford a large utility fee increase. In 2017, 6 of our 7 council members were removed from office over an additional $12 monthly safety fee for law enforcement. And in 2019, we were issued an enforcement action from DEQ requiring us to build a $28 million wastewater facility. To add to it, we had critical potable water system deficiencies, road needs, development pressures, and all the other typical operation challenges that other small cities face. So you might ask yourself, after facing the difficulties over a $12 monthly fee, how a city like Aumsville would address potentially hundreds of dollars of an increase on the monthly bill. So even before the recall of the council members, we knew that there was a division in the community. In 2017, we began a visioning process to engage residents to have a meaningful conversation about the future direction of the community. The city previously started this process in 2015, but it wasn't completed at that time. But after a series of community held meetings over 3 years, we were able to finalize our vision plan in 2020 with the help of significant community participation. As you all mentioned, it wasn't unusual for us to have over 100 people in attendance at those meetings. And in the end, we decided to focus on these 6 areas, which include livable neighborhoods, vibrant downtown and healthy economy, excellent public facilities and infrastructure, inclusive events and celebrations, public art and community branding, and civic engagement and communications. So a couple of our biggest challenges over the last several years have been the drinking water system and the wastewater system. The water distribution system, let me move on. The water distribution system for our potable water has had no major system improvements since the 70s. And we have inadequate fire storage as well as 20% asbestos water lines, which means that we are losing about 17% of our potable water through that system. Regarding our wastewater system, Aumsville's wastewater system is a lagoon treatment that was originally installed in 1960. It was a lot smaller then, and so was Aumsville. So it's a simple natural ecosystem process that has a lot of limitations. So with growth over time, it was necessary to add 2 more lagoons and some aeration to support the natural processing, and it just can't keep up with demand anymore. In 2017, DEQ conducted a review and determined that Aumsville's wastewater system is unable to meet EPA and DEQ standards for TMDL and ammonia levels. So this current treatment system, it doesn't have the technology or capacity to manage these issues that they stated in their review. So if no changes were to be made, we'd be facing huge fines for violating our discharge limits. And after this review, DEQ issued enforcement action against Aumsville and worked with the city on a mutual agreement order to install a mechanical processing system that would introduce the necessary aeration and processing to lower the ammonia levels in the effluent discharge.
Now, that sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it? But remember, this is for an infrastructure summit of all these entities that are looking to fund these same projects, so they're very well aware of that. Just a couple of things to note. So in 2017, that's when DEQ did their review and issued the enforcement order against the city. We spent the next year or so negotiating what was called an MAO, a mutual agreement order, and that was to when they issued their enforcement action in 17, they said you're in violation today of the new standards, and we can fine you on a daily basis. And so part of our negotiation was to negotiate away the threat of those daily fines. And the MAO memorialized the process on both DEQ side and the city side of how we move forward to gain compliance.
I have a question. So you just said that those lagoons are unable to keep up with demand, right?
That's correct.
Earlier, when I was on the board, it said it had nothing to do with demand.
So when I stated that earlier, I was saying that from the 1960s, when we first installed the wastewater system in 1960, it was only 2 lagoons and there were 500 residents in Aumsville. So it was actually updated, and I think it was 85, somewhere in the 80s.
But that was from
76.
flow, not ammonia.
Right.
Yeah.
It didn't have to do with the amounts of discharge, the amounts of ammonia in the discharge.
Facility, not
Yeah.
quality or quantity.
Now we have a quality issue.
That's right.
Because the lagoons are oversaturated.
The lagoons have been oversaturated, so
Quality because the standard has changed from what it was originally approved for. And the ammonia level isn't because of the number of pools, the ammonia level is just because any
What type of ammonia?
you're in your battle. I can't tell you the mechanical makeup of the ammonia.
Well, you're in charge of technology, so this is going to be part of your scope, right? So we need to figure this out. What type of ammonia are we dealing with?
well, we hire engineers to handle that because that's not something we could ever know all the ins and outs for. That's why we have our engineers and our public works guys.
And then on the city of Aumsville, they said that they changed the requirements for ammonia in 2011.
That's right. It was in 2010 or 11. They did start to change those systems, but they also told us that you're fine. You don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So every year until 2017, they were not telling us that we had to change anything. So in 2017, when they conducted the review, they finally said, okay, now we are going to start enforcing these rules, and now you have to bring your system into compliance. During that time, we also added some additional aeration to try to reduce the ammonia that way. And it did help a little bit, but it just wasn't enough.
Yeah. Water conditioning, what's that?
Wouldn't have had any effect one way or the other. It's not the amount of homes that are connected to the system that dictate the ammonia and then TMDL. It's ammonia. There's only one way to get rid of ammonia. I mean, there's all kinds of little band-aid methods to try to reduce it, but there's really only one way to get rid of it. and that's to go through a chemical restructuring. And so you look for a nitrification process where you convert the ammonia to nitrification, and then you look for a denitrification process to expel the nitrification. And I'm telling you what the process is, but I'm not a scientist that deals with that, so I can't get too detailed in exactly how that works. What I do know is you have to have a very controlled process in order to be able to do those things. And you can't do that with a lagoon system. So there are lagoon systems around the state that don't have necessarily the same issues that we have with ammonia, that are located in different regions where, you know, maybe it's a weather issue, or their the body of water that they decant their effluent to is larger, and so they get a higher dilution rate. We don't have those things here because
We discharge into Beaver Creek, which is very small. And so that's why DEQ says that we have to have the ammonia level so much lower, because it's such a small creek that it has to, otherwise it's a really concentrated amount into that small stream. Yeah. Okay. Let me restart.
Garrett, can you hold so we can finish the presentation, and then at the end you can ask them questions? Okay.
Thank you. All right, so Aumsville does not have any local news source and no official platforms, no local newspaper or anything like that. So as a small city, we have really limited staff and resources. So getting the message out to the community can be really difficult, especially when the community interest is generally low, and lower still when it comes to capital infrastructure projects and other initiatives that don't provide any novel, interesting benefit to them.
So one of the things that, given these limitations, we were tasked with was how do we effectively communicate this information out to our community? Not just, there's a desire not just for these big projects that were coming up, but for things, community events. How do we get our community more engaged in the livability of our community? How do we bring them more together as a community and enjoy, you know, community-wide activities, things of that nature? How do we build on that, you know, great place to live brand? And so one of the things we were doing was looking at all of our options, our social media channels, what they were doing at the time, our newsletter, the content of the newsletter, and also our community engagement and the two-way communication that we were getting at the time. And one of the things that we found was we didn't have a very high community participation rate as far as like people that were connected to our social media channels and our website. We had some, but it wasn't a majority of the community. And a lot of times the engagement was negative. So there wasn't a lot of positive engagement where people were talking about, you know, this was a great event, or I'd like to know more about this, or things like that. It was really more a complaint driven engagement. And so we wanted to be able to turn that around a little bit. So we started to use our social media channels. Basically what we did was we took those activities that we saw spikes in engagement, things like our statue project here in front of City Hall, our Christmas in the Park event, our Corn Festival, and we started to capitalize on the events that people were engaging in, and then building a following onto the city's channels and media sources where we could provide this information that people typically don't go searching for. And so what we saw was increases 600 or 700% of people engaging and becoming members of our community, clicks on our city web informational pages. And most recently, that is over 1,000% engagement. And so then we started to take making community engagement videos and information videos and pushing those out through these various channels. And we just wanted to highlight some of the communication and feedback. And we have hundreds of messages like this. These are just a few for the presentation, but things like, you know, I love the art you chose and what it represents. It's beautiful in so many ways. That was related to our statues, our Pledge of Allegiance statues in front of City Hall. And I think there were a number of social media posts, and some of them had 60, 70 shares. They had hundreds and hundreds of engagements. And they weren't even our posts, they were just community member posts.
We had a lot of people coming to just take pictures in front of the statues. That was really cute, and they were
Yeah.
posting them online.
Yeah,
It was fun.
absolutely. Our kids loved the event. Thank you for providing it. It was a great opportunity for them. This one, I think I moved to a magical town, free corn in the summer, free pumpkins in the fall. It's like a Hallmark movie. There's just lots of positive engagement. And so we really worked hard to be able to address, things related to our events and the projects that we're doing to try to meet some of the needs. As you know, you saw that vision plan, the art, the community events, these were all part of that feedback, that detailed feedback we got from the community. One of the things that we did to test, it was a good test of our system and our communication channels, was when we had the canyon fires. And we had a bunch of ash that was falling everywhere in the valley. Now, it wasn't dangerous, it wasn't hot ash, but it was drifting down to the canyon. So a lot of people were concerned, and so we had many residents who were putting sprinklers out on top of their homes before they went to work. And what we saw was a drawdown in the water system, and we saw a trend that we would not be able to maintain because we're just not geared to have everybody's faucets open all at one time constantly. Our system just isn't structured for that. We got on our social media platforms and encouraged people to turn those sprinklers off, inform them of the danger of running out of water. And probably within 10 or 15 minutes of that engagement, our wells started to come, our well pumpage started to recede, and within an hour it was back to normal. So I think that's a good success story, that whatever we're doing in our engagement, it does have a direct impact. So this is a video to support our Christmas in the Park event. We started this little engagement video. Kirsty was our news reporter, actor, slash many hats in the city. And as you know, one of the things we do to promote that event is we always come up with these little playful storylines and things related to the Grinch or related to our theme. One year we had Elsa from Frozen. And so here's the video. The audio is a little low because
there has been another sighting of the unruly green culprit. Multiple witnesses inside of Ace Hardware spotted him stealing Christmas decorations and fleeing out the front door after harassing a customer. There's no telling where he might show up next. CRSMS News will be covering Christmas in the Park on December 10th to keep watch for further appearances made by the miscreant. I'm Kirsty reporting on another holiday update in Aumsville with CRSMS News.
these little promotional videos, and we did several of them at different area businesses, and the Grinch stole pies from Newfields. He was taking Christmas decorations from the hardware store. We had him in all kinds of mischief around town, and it really did help promote the event. We had a lot of great feedback. We always get really good feedback for these types of events. But again, it's about engaging people on those things that really pique their interest, and then try to take that engagement and make sure that they are a channel that we can inform about something like budget or infrastructure. People typically don't want to spend their Monday night listening to a big presentation about infrastructure, even if it affects them. And I don't blame them. It's not very exciting stuff, but it is important, and it does have a direct impact. So we want to make sure we've done everything we can. So we also did some community outreach channels, videos, so that we can inform the community. So this was about giving the community a snapshot without having to sit through a couple hour council meeting. So, this is 4.5 minutes.
Anytime you flush the toilet or run water inside your home, it flows through lateral service lines from your house to the sewer main line. Sewer mains connect to manholes where all the wastewater flows together and then onto the master lift station at the wastewater treatment plant. This overview of the city shows the lift station, treatment ponds, and the 2 discharge points. At the top is the Beaver Creek discharge, and at the bottom is the effluent irrigation site. Aumsville operates a closed sewer system, meaning sewage is not combined with stormwater. On a typical day, 700 to 1,000 pounds of waste matter comes to the treatment plant, and we discharge about 30 to 50 pounds of treated waste. Our lagoon system typically removes between 90 and 95% of the solid waste material before we discharge it into Beaver Creek. Waste solids that settle to the bottom of the lagoon is called sludge. Lagoons are designed for sludge removal every 20 years or when the water level above the sludge is less than 3 feet in depth. The sludge in our lagoons has never been removed since it was installed in 1960. So what happens if there's less than 3 feet? It allows sunlight to reach the sludge, causing it to go septic and put off a horrible stench. All 4 of our lagoons are close to needing this sludge removed soon, at an estimated cost of $1.5 million. It is very expensive to remove this sludge. The lagoons would have to be drained, and there would have to be some sort of drying process similar to what a mechanical treatment plant would use. The city operates under a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System (NPDES) permit issued by the Environmental Protection Agency and DEQ. These agencies are directing the city to comply with the Federal Clean Water Act. Currently, we are under a mutual agreement order, an MAO, with a timeline to bring our system into compliance. Our lagoon system cannot and never will be able to meet the current DEQ standards for ammonia discharge. A mechanical treatment plant can process ammonia and clean the water more effectively than our lagoon system. On the left is the wastewater coming into our treatment plant. In the middle, the treated water leaving our plant. On the right is Class A treated water from a mechanical treatment plant. Mechanical plants can remove much more than a lagoon system. In the rainy winter months, a gallon of water entering the plant will pass through in about 30 days. In drier months, that gallon may take up to 160 days or more before it is discharged. Sadly, our low-tech lagoons cannot meet the current ammonia standards that have a direct toxic effect to aquatic life in our streams. Mechanical treatment plants have a proven record of removing most of the waste matter from the water and returning cleaner water to the environment. If we continue with our current process, we will face fines for noncompliance with the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. There is no easy fix, and the required upgrades will ultimately increase the cost of our sewer services to residents. The Aumsville City Council and city staff are working diligently to find the city's best options that will meet the needs of our citizens and the environment. We hope this video gives you a better understanding of Aumsville's sewer treatment system and its failure to meet the water quality standards with the ammonia levels in our wastewater. Thank you for watching.
Now, again, remember I told you about many hats. We don't have a staff of media department. We don't have a technological department that does video editing or filming or film crews. We did this all on our own, just internal staff. And I think that's as good informational video as I've seen related to wastewater. It provides a lot of condensed information in a very short video. Now we have a longer video online as well, because for people that wanted to have a deeper understanding about our system. Most people don't want to watch a 20-minute video, so that's why we came up with this, which is a little over 4 minutes. And it's short enough, long enough to get the information, but short enough to maintain. People will watch it, and we have seen lots of traffic coming into our website, looking on those channels. So I just want to talk a little bit more about some of the things that we've done. We've done these YouTube educational videos. We've done information in our newsletter. We've reached out to state and local county officials, state officials. As you know, we did receive a grant from our state partners this year and received a couple of other grants last year and the year before. So we've really been, our council, the mayor, you guys been boarded for petitions for people to sign, as well as informational letters that gave everybody kind of a snapshot of what we were facing. And you asked the community to partner with us, to be stakeholders in the project. And so we could maybe help us leverage additional dollars. Funding agencies like to see that our community is engaged. They like to see that our policy board is engaged and have ownership over the project. They don't want to go through a lot of effort to fund something and then something happen and it doesn't get built, because now they didn't get to use that money and they want to be able to use it and say something was done. So all of those things are really important. We've done lots of in-person meetings at City Hall. We had petitions on the counter there and talked to utility customers as they came in. Online social media channels. We've done many articles in the newsletter. We put in our electronic message center and we put messages up there. And then we printed our materials in both English and Spanish so that we're able to communicate effectively to, the majority populations, which we have. Typically, we have English speakers and Spanish speakers. So,
And we were specifically told that actually got us some extra points in a couple of our funding applications too.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we were trying to cross-reference the demographics in the community. So to date, we have over 870 signatures out of 1,300 households. So I think we've done really good, and it really impressed the funding agencies that we were able to do that.
It also really impressed the state when we talked to them.
Yeah. In addition to those videos that we saw, we had lots of other videos. We had Kirsty pretending to be a reporter. We have we made up an Aumsville news channel because we don't have a news agency. And she was out prepping the community to come to the State of the City presentation, which, as you know, I do every January, February. And we were really highlighting a lot of these issues each year for the last 3 or 4 years. But just let's talk a little bit about our success. Now, when I first got here in 2016, we faced a lot of the same infrastructure. We weren't under an enforcement action, but we still had a capital facilities plan that said we needed all of these improvements. And it's $40–50 million worth of improvements, right, Nico? You were here at the time. And council was like, well, you got to get some grants. And we went to a lot of the infrastructure summit and we heard from a lot of granting agencies, and what was the message that they were saying? Don't rely on grants because they're few and far between. They are few and far between. People aren't just standing there waiting to give us money. You really have to work for it. And it's not easy. But we were able to get a $300,000 direct grant from one of our state representatives. They could direct a little pool of money a few years ago, and this is for our water system funding. This is going to be for the new main gallon reservoir. Remember when we were talking about the fires and the ag and everybody pumping all at once? Well, one of the reasons we couldn't keep up with that is our wells don't pump enough to keep up with community demand, so you have to have storage, and we just didn't have enough storage to deal with something that was unusual. It was very unusual, the amount of water people were pumping at the time. It wasn't normal usage. So we've got in our capital facilities plan, that's been in there for many years. Million gallon reservoir, we were able to get $3.257 million, $3,257,000, better way to phrase it, from the state, and I think that was in 2020,
I think you're right.
maybe.
I think so.
And then the city's putting in $470,000 match. That's, I believe most of that's coming from either, system development charges for new construction. And or, we have a little capital, we put a little bit of money into capital projects, a fund, and, so it's coming from one of those two. But I think most of it's coming from system development charges. So that's a little over $4 million. Now that would be $30-40 a month in a rate increase, and the community is not having to pay. That's fully funded. So there's no rate increase going to be associated with the project. So wastewater funding, and I think this is what really got the attention of the state agencies and the League of Oregon Cities, is we've done pretty good. We got a direct award in ARPA grant. COVID was at its height, and the federal government was trying to put some money back into the economy. They gave a direct distribution to all the cities in every state, and on like a per capita or population type based formula. What council said is, let's take this money and let's put it in the wastewater project fund. That was the first funding we received. And so that money has been directed to be in that fund. Marion County had money to reissue through ARPA, and we were able to get a $1 million grant from Marion County. The federal government had an omnibus bill, which is basically a nice way to say kind of a Christmas tree bill that they were floating a couple of years ago, and we had a funding request into that. We worked with our federal delegation to try to get money, and we were able to get $1.25 million there. We had in our system development charters, remember, new construction connections, and our capital fund about $1.2 million in city match that we could contribute. Now, the important thing is we've been able to use that city match and those other grants to leverage additional grants, because a lot of times grants require a certain amount of match too. And so if you don't have some money, you can't leverage them. And that's always been the big issue with small communities and grants. So we were able to roll all that up and use that, and then keep rolling down. We applied to our state delegation for some funding. A number of you testified, our mayor testified in front of the state capital committee, and we were able to get $5 million awarded through the state lottery bonds, I believe it was. So as you heard earlier tonight, we were able to get a $6 million loan forgiveness on a $15 million loan. So we're going to have to take a $9 million loan, but we'll get 6. So it's total 15. 9 million of it we'll have to pay back, but we're going to get 6 million free. That's pretty good. I mean, if you walked up to anybody, on the street and said, I'll give you $10 for every $4 you give me, or something like that. People will take it. It's free money, so you're going to do it. The other funding mechanism we have is the Department of Environmental Quality has our own internal granting program. And so we're able to get $2 billion grant from them for a $2 billion loan. So right now, our total estimated funding for the wastewater is a little over $28 million for the facility. Now, those numbers can change. We haven't went out to bid. These are just engineers' estimates. But right now we have a little over 16 million in grants and 11 million in loan commitment. So really, we're looking at an $11 million loan out of 37 million dollars worth of infrastructure. It's actually pretty phenomenal for just 2 or 3 years of effort. And I'd like to say that we're just really, really good at what we do, and I think that's the insinuation by the groups that are asking us to come speak, but I will tell you that it was really about being in the right place at the right time and being prepared to go out and capture that money, where a lot of people were still in the decision-making process. We had already talked about it. We already had direction from our community. We already had projects in planning stages, or we had capital facilities plans approved, because early on, council looked at all those things and said, we need to move this ship forward, get the plans in place so we can access funding. So when the ARPA funds and the infrastructure funding materialized, we had plans on a shelf, and we could go right to the funding agencies and say, yeah, we're ready to move this project forward. And a lot of other communities didn't have things ready to go. So they might have had a needs assessment that said we need something, but they didn't really look like or how much it might cost.
So I can say that when Della and Nico and I, when we were lobbying, right at the beginning of the year, as soon as the new year came in and we all came into our office again, our term started again, we actually were early meeting with our state leaders, but we also did follow-up. I think that really helped us. I wanted to make sure that the city of Aumsville really stood out against the other cities. Again, not to minimize their needs, but to make sure that we did our due diligence to make, like, sending those thank you cards. The comments that I got back from our state and federal leaders is, one, the engagement going door to door was amazing. That was really good part on us. And that 4-minute video really helped them understand. Those things, I think, are what really helped us stand out, and us being ready, just saying, okay, this is where we're at. And where we had that timeline saying we need to start getting funding now so that we can build.
And we were doing a lot of planning in advance. We were meeting with stakeholders from all the area agencies for the last 3 years. We started meetings back in 2019 with them, actually even pre-COVID, and talking to all the resources about on a monthly basis. We would meet and we'd say, what are the new,
I remember those
new
meetings, yes.
opportunities? Tell us about them. And they kind of became partners to some extent in helping us access a lot of that money. That $6 million loan forgiveness, that's an anomaly.
It was 5 million, wasn't it? I thought
Well, they're
Up to.
up to 5 million, yeah.
up to $5 million a year to give in loan forgiveness for the entire state. And because they were part of that partnership, they actually asked for a special allocation from the federal USDA branch out of their budget for us. And it was
Acting the federal representatives helped get us that.
Yeah.
that's right. So, it was about building that coalition and all those things early on. The other things that we were doing is, we were engaging with our engineers pre capital facilities plans, and pre any infrastructure or ARPA money. And we were saying, money is going to materialize and we want to make sure we're front and center. So we want you guys doing plans right now. We want things that are, construction ready, start now, because when that money materializes, we want to have something on the shelf that we can take. So we had kind of a jump where typically what would happen is money would materialize. Then you'd be like, how do we access the money? Let's start putting everything in a row. We had done that work a year earlier. And so we were positioned to get it.
Yeah. Ron, I'm gonna step away for a second.
Can I ask a question?
Same slide, isn't it?
Let me see, I think we're on. Okay, here we go.
Does the city have a money in federal source in 2000 and 2023 to see how money increases as more household and population have increased? Is that something that you can do a public grant request for?
I think you don't have to do it, it's just that if I'm sure you've got some practice that. And it's probably on the state website.
And then, what is going to be the cost of operating the new American facility?
It's in our capital facilities plan. I think it's around 360. Does that sound right?
That sounds right. I think 360 or 380, maybe.
Yeah. It's 360 addition, 360,000 addition, on top of what's our current cost. I'd have to go back and actually analyze the budget because the differential in the cost is more about like and material cost and things like that. I don't think we have a lot of staff built into that additional cost because we can't assign a company.
How do you?
It's not necessary, right? I work with mechanics, but all the time. Wastewater treatment have pumps and motors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Down.
Yeah,
And so for you to have someone come in to replace that motor, it's either gotta have a license.
Yeah.
Or it's gotta be on that subcontract and the hire some change in the boat.
yeah, that's factored into the capital facilities plan. The engineers come up with, you know, an estimate. It's not in fact. But it's, you know, they have a pretty good handle on building things all the time. So they have like expectancy of each piece of equipment. And we have factored into our budgets, major repairs.
Okay. And how many personnel are going to be hired for additional documents, 2,000?
I don't know, did we have any FTEs in that number? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I know that we have space for one more right now, but what's that?
What about operators?
We have operators on staff.
Yeah. They have the correct licensing and everything already too. Certifications.
The new facilities, I will tell you that I've managed both old systems and new systems, and the newer systems are fairly computerized. The old system, you used to have to go out there, manually test everything, kind of turns the valves, see what happens, turns the valve, another way, what happens. The new system, a lot of it's digital. You know, a lot of the monitoring is digital, a lot of it's done through a computerized SCADA system. So where the old systems, you have to have somebody on staff 24 hours a day to watch it. The new systems will send an alert out if something changes outside of operational parameters. So you don't necessarily have to have somebody there 24/7. So to some extent, they're a little bit more efficient to operate. But remember, when we're talking about these numbers, these are all best guess. So, you know, it's not, we're not guaranteeing, you know, everything's gonna work out exactly like we expect it to. So far, we've done really well at our estimates. But there's not really you know, everything's a little unique, so there's not really something where you can go chart and say.
What are you trying to say?
Ron, I just want to remind you that when you're not on the speaker, like it's not going to be picked up on recording. Sorry.
Thank you.
People want out. Facility.
Our engineer does that work. I mean, he's got the data that he's provided to us.
Because we got $28 million in funding and, you know, there's 1/3 of the bill is already gonna be put on the citizens, right? To recuperate that.
Mhm.
But every year we're gonna have maintenance. Gonna have to be done and
Yeah.
additional personnel.
So just so you know, Garrett, when somebody watches this online, they're probably not going to be able to hear everything that you're saying. If you're not speaking through a mic, that's what she's saying. I mean, I'm not really sure the answer that you want there. I mean, this presentation was really about the success where we have worked tirelessly as a staff to take that burden off of you as a resident. And there's some cost to it, but you wouldn't believe the stress and work that we went through to lower that to a point, to the lowest point we could get. And we're still working on it. We're not trying to pass this cost off on residents. We'd like it to be no cost, but we can only work with the realities of what we have in front of us.
So I'm gonna,
Electricity is gonna cost so much money.
Ron, I'm just gonna pick up on this and when we meet with our state leaders and our federal leaders, the very first question we get asked is how much responsibility is Aumsville able to take on? So when we apply for these grants, when we lobby, that's the very first question. And we come back with statistical facts about where our community is in their cost of living. And then we come back with how that is going to impact. The bottom line is the town is going to have to pick up some of the responsibility for us to get funding. It's not an easy decision. If I could write a $28 million check to cover the whole thing, if I had that, I would. Every one of us would. The information that you're asking, we're not there yet. For those detailed, how much it's going to cost to run the electricity, how much it's going to cost for how many more full-time employees, FTEs are we going to need? We're not there yet. We're in the planning stages and getting funding so that we can be ground ready. And when we get there, we will have that information ready. That's how it's going to affect the cost.
Well,
we were given an estimate
yeah,
of if we wrote a $30 million check or $20 million check, the water bill would still go up $50 to $60
Yep.
just for O&M. And that was just based off engineers' projection. That wasn't an actual like written down, this is exactly what it's going to cost.
well, actually, the engineers' estimates are based on somewhat of the analysis that you're talking about, but you know, I didn't do the analysis. I'm not the engineer. I'm not a licensed engineer. But if you look at our capital facilities plan, that analysis is in there. And so, you know, he based that off of, you know, usage, kilowatt usage or whatever for each of the pumps and what the manufacturer says those things use. So the engineer did provide those details, but you just got to remember, it's not a perfect world. You know, we're taking as much of this detailed information as we can, and we're making an estimate that, you know, it may be a little higher, it may be a little lower, but these are the acceptable industry norms. So when a funding agency comes and asks us for all that data, they're looking at that to see if those O&M numbers are realistic, because we've got to pay back a certain amount of loans. And they want to know that we're going to be able to cover that cost. So they look at all of those things. So all of those numbers will go through multiple vetting stages before we get to a final construction project from all of these funding agencies. So many people will review it. I'm not the person that can quantify electric use for a particular air pump or suction pump. And really, our council isn't going to be experts in that. We rely on experts that we hire, which is our engineer. We don't all get an engineering degree to be able to decide to do a project like this. That's not in our kind of wheelhouse.
The phase that we're at right now is the design phase, so we don't have the full facility materials exactly in a row yet. That's what the engineering department is doing right now. They're going through and they're saying, this is the exact parts that we need for all of these different things. So once we have that, that's what the mayor was saying. Once we have that, we'll have those numbers available. But until that design is fully complete, we can't estimate the exact numbers because we don't know the exact parts that we're going to need. So
Are we ready to move on, Ron?
I'm done,
Okay.
unless you have questions for me.
So that presentation is, you're going to start it on, the first time you're going to give it is this Thursday, correct? And that's
Yes.
for a higher level audience that understands all those.
Yeah,
acronyms.
it's state funding agencies and cities around the state that are attending. There's a lot of cities that are
Mhm.
attending. So mayors, councils from other cities
it's the
and
Oregon Statewide Infrastructure Summit. So it's
Yeah.
people from all over and all the, there's Business Oregon. That Business Oregon is one of the biggest hosts of it.
I don't think I.
Yeah.
Was
all
that
of
on my
their
calendar?
affiliations.
I don't think it was. I think, so.
So did we get the grant funding already? What we presented tonight, yes.
That's right.
they gave us grant funding, but we don't understand the full cost.
So the grant funding is based on the information that we do have. You can't have all, until we have all of the funding lined up, we can't start the project. So they're in the design phase right now. The first step to get the USDA loan even considered was to have a preliminary design report. So that's what our numbers right now are based on, our estimates of what we think the new O&M costs are gonna be. So that's why he gave you that number of about 380, but it might be more or less than that because we don't have the exact design planned out yet, because we had to get a grant for that part too. So once they have the design fully laid out, that's what we're gonna have to base everything else on. So we got those grants based on that. We have these other grants. So the newest grants are based on the old grants having already been in place because you have to have someone to fund all of the different parts.
All right, so moving on to mayor and councilor reports. Does anyone have anything to report?
I have SCAT's meeting tomorrow. Or
Is that the both of you, or is it
just me.
just you?
And if I can't go, then he.
Then he goes, okay. For,
I have a question.
Oh.
Did you hear back from the local public safety coordinating council?
yeah, that email that I sent off, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't here for the last meeting, but we got something back that said they had a member that they were proposing to.
I saw that.
Yeah,
Point, yeah.
and that you were at large, that you were the at-large member. Yes. So, yes, I did hear back on that. Next meeting is October. I had it on my calendar. I might not be able to make the next meeting and I'll let you two know.
October 9th.
October what?
9th.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, if it's the 9th, no, I won't be able to make the next meeting. So, just to let you guys know.
We'll be prepared.
Okay, and then, if there's nothing else, we have, anything for good of the order?
A quick question. Are we still gonna be meeting, Ron, on the 9th, even though I believe it's
Oh, that's right. It's a,
federal holiday?
Federal
I know
holiday.
Some. Yeah.
or
slash-
I think it got changed to Indigenous People Day.
I know some local jurisdictions observe it.
Is it a federal holiday?
It is a federal
Yeah.
holiday, yeah.
Let me look at it and I'll send the email out. We may need to just cancel
Okay,
that
it's the
meeting.
holiday formerly known as Columbus Day. I don't know if.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Right.
We'll send an email out.
I don't know what the correct name is, and I don't want to say the wrong.
Indigenous
It's, I think it's been changed to
Indigenous,
People's
yeah.
Day, yeah. All right, if that's the case, then I might not have to worry about it. We have a couple correspondence in the packets. You guys should have be able to review them if you wanted to attend any of those. And if that's it, then we can adjourn the meeting at 8:57 PM.